A flight attendant humiliated LeBron James and told him to leave first class. But what happened next? No one saw it coming. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? LeBron James stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, adjusting the brim of a plain navy baseball cap. The man staring back didn't look like an NBA legend. No designer suit, no flashy jewelry, just a gray hoodie, loose jeans, worn-out sneakers, oversized sunglasses, and a black face mask. If you didn't know him, you wouldn't recognize him. And that was the point. After years under the relentless spotlight, every move analyzed, every word picked apart, LeBron just wanted one thing: a normal moment. No paparazzi, no VIP treatment. Just real life. So he did something different. He booked a regular commercial flight. Still first class, but nothing like the private jets he was used to. As he walked through the chaotic halls of LAX, the sights and sounds brought him back. Rolling suitcases clattered by. Kids cried. The smell of fast food mixed with jet fuel. It was messy, loud, and weirdly comforting. Just like the old days, before the titles, before the fame. People passed by without even noticing. Some were glued to their phones, others juggling kids and coffee. A security officer barely looked up. For the first time in a long time, LeBron was invisible. And it felt good. At the gate, he handed over his boarding pass. The attendant scanned it without making eye contact. "Enjoy your flight," she mumbled, already turning to the next person. LeBron shrugged and headed down the jet bridge, the low rumble of the plane growing louder. On board, a flight attendant with a name tag that read Susan gave him a quick nod. "Seats are to your left," she said flatly. But then the energy shifted. A sharply dressed man stepped on behind LeBron. Expensive suit, confident walk. Suddenly, Susan lit up. "Welcome aboard, sir. May I offer you a glass of champagne?" LeBron quietly found his seat by the window. He slid his backpack under the seat and looked out at the runway. More passengers boarded. Attendants moved through the aisles, offering drinks, helping with bags. But none of them even glanced at him. Across the aisle, a couple sipped sparkling wine. An older woman got a blanket and pillow without asking. A businessman nearby received a curated stack of magazines. LeBron raised an eyebrow. Still, he said nothing. The seat next to him stayed empty until a heavy-set man in a pinstriped suit showed up. He barely looked at LeBron before squeezing in with a grunt, adjusting his cufflinks like he owned the place. LeBron nodded politely. The man didn't respond. Then Susan returned, her smile suddenly back. "Mr. Whitman. So lovely to see you again," she beamed, turning to the man next to LeBron. "Your usual drink?" "Scotch on the rocks," he replied, giving LeBron a quick side-eye. "And for you, sir?" Susan asked, still not looking at LeBron. "Nothing for now," Mr. Whitman answered casually, waving her off. LeBron cleared his throat gently. "Excuse me," he said through his mask. "Could I get a bottle of water, please?" Susan turned, clearly irritated. "We'll be serving beverages after takeoff," she snapped before walking off. Mr. Whitman let out a quiet chuckle. "They let just about anyone into first class these days," he muttered, loud enough for LeBron to hear. That familiar feeling hit LeBron hard, a tight knot in his chest. Irritation. Disappointment. He'd felt it before, long before fame ever shielded him. Being judged. Being dismissed. He took a deep breath. This wasn't about comfort. This was about seeing life from the other side. The real side. The cabin lights dimmed. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Takeoff was moments away. But the real journey? It was already happening. The flight attendant ran through the safety demo with a rehearsed smile. LeBron fastened his seatbelt and glanced around. But what was supposed to feel like luxury felt more like a cage. As the plane rolled toward the runway, he closed his eyes, searching for peace in the anonymity he'd carefully crafted. But it didn't help. He could still feel the whispers, the side glances, the silent judgments hanging in the air like fog. Then came the roar of the engines. The city below turned into a blur of lights, swallowed by the clouds. And for a brief moment, it was quiet. When the seatbelt sign turned off, flight attendants got to work, drinks, snacks, the usual routine. A young male attendant with a warm smile approached their row. "Can I get you something to drink?" he asked Mr. Whitman. "Another scotch," Whitman replied without even looking up. The attendant turned to LeBron. "And for you, sir?" Before LeBron could answer, Susan cut in. "I've got this, Jeremy," she snapped. Jeremy hesitated, confused, but stepped aside. "I was just going to say," LeBron began, but Susan didn't let him finish. "Sir, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be serving beverages after takeoff," she said sharply, her tone final. LeBron leaned back, jaw tight. This wasn't just inattentiveness. It felt intentional. He watched Susan walk down the aisle, now suddenly full of charm, serving drinks, chatting, smiling at everyone except him. "Unbelievable," he muttered. Whitman chuckled. "You know, if you're uncomfortable up here, no shame in moving back to economy." LeBron turned his head, locking eyes with him. "I'm fine where I am." "Thanks." Whitman shrugged and looked away. As LeBron stared out at the night sky, he couldn't help but reflect on the irony. He tried to escape the spotlight, only to discover a different kind of attention. Not the praise of fans, but the quiet disdain of strangers. Not the pressure of fame, but the sting of subtle prejudice. Time crawled by. The in-flight movie didn't interest him. Sleep wouldn't come. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a notebook and pen. Writing had always been his way to process, no cameras, no filters, just thoughts on paper. He scribbled down what he'd felt since boarding. The coldness. The quiet rejection. The way people judged without knowing a thing about him. The words came fast, and with them, a sense of release. Then came a soft voice. "Excuse me," Jeremy said quietly, standing beside him. "Thought you might want this." He handed LeBron the bottle of water discreetly, like it was a secret. A genuine smile spread beneath LeBron's mask. "Thank you," he said. Jeremy nodded. "Let me know if you need anything." It was a small act, but it meant everything. The rest of the flight passed uneventfully, but the weight of what had happened stayed with LeBron. This wasn't just about him. This was about the way people treat others when they think no one's watching. As the plane descended, passengers rushed to prepare for landing. Seats clicked upright. Laptops closed. Phones lit up again. Life resumed. But something had shifted. LeBron felt a quiet mix of relief and resolve. This flight had opened his eyes, not to something new, but something others had faced all their lives. He could take off the mask and be himself again. But most people couldn't. When the plane reached the gate, Susan gave the usual landing speech, her voice as flat as ever. LeBron packed up, slid his notebook into his bag. "Well, that was enlightening," Whitman muttered sarcastically, straightening his tie. LeBron looked at him for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "It was." As the aisle cleared, Jeremy caught LeBron's eye and gave him a subtle nod. LeBron returned it. A small moment, but real. Stepping off the plane, he pulled down his mask, took off his sunglasses, and breathed in the air. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't hidden. And he didn't want to be. People rushed past, caught in their own lives. But LeBron wasn't just passing through anymore. He was paying attention. And what he just experienced wasn't something he could ignore. This flight wasn't just a trip. It was a wake-up call. And from now on, LeBron James wasn't just going to play the game, he was going to challenge the rules. The flight settled into routine, but the tension, it never left. In fact, it seemed to settle in too, like an unwelcome passenger. And Mr. Whitman, sitting next to LeBron, made sure he felt every ounce of it. LeBron leaned back, trying to block it all out, the hushed voices, the rustle of papers, the polite laughter that somehow excluded him. The low drone of the engines became a soundtrack to something deeper, silent judgment. He'd felt this before. In locker rooms. In restaurants. At gala events. Wherever he went, eyes followed, not just because of who he was, but because of who people thought he was. And right now, disguised and anonymous, that judgment was raw and unfiltered. Next to him, Whitman sprawled comfortably, legs wide, elbows intruding into LeBron's space with every sip of his scotch or shift of his briefcase. There was no courtesy, no awareness, just quiet dominance. "Sorry about that," Whitman muttered, elbowing him again. But the apology was hollow. "Guess these seats are a little tight, especially for someone your size," he added with a smug chuckle. LeBron didn't respond, but his grip tightened around the armrest. Years in the spotlight had taught him patience. Control. But that didn't make the irritation any easier to swallow. A few minutes passed in strained silence, broken only by the clink of glasses and the rustle of snack wrappers. LeBron's mind drifted to his childhood. Back to Akron. Back to when fitting in wasn't about fame, it was about survival. It wasn't just about proving he could play ball. It was about proving he belonged. That he was just as smart, just as worthy, just as human. And yet here he was, decades later, still carrying the burden of someone else's assumptions. "You all right over there?" Whitman asked suddenly, his tone dipped in fake concern. LeBron turned to him. The guy smiled, but his eyes never met LeBron's. They floated somewhere above his head, like even looking him in the eye was too much effort. "Yeah," LeBron said quietly. "Just fine." It was absurd. He was LeBron James, one of the most famous athletes on the planet. And yet, here, hidden behind a hoodie and mask, he was just another black man being quietly sized up and dismissed. For a moment, the urge bubbled up to rip off the mask, drop the name, and watch Whitman's smugness melt into embarrassment. But that wouldn't fix the real problem. Because the truth was, it was never about who he was. It was about what people expected him to be. Just then, Susan appeared again. Her face lit up as she leaned toward Mr. Whitman. "Mr. Whitman, I see you're settling in nicely. Can I offer you another drink?" Whitman lifted his glass. "Another scotch on the rocks." "Of course, sir," she said with a graceful nod. And then, as she turned, she glanced at LeBron, barely. Her expression didn't change. No acknowledgement. No offer. Nothing. It wasn't rude. It was worse, it was calculated indifference. She walked down the aisle, stopping at every other passenger in first class. Greeting them by name. Smiling. Offering drinks. Asking questions. LeBron watched it all, unblinking. That tight feeling in his stomach grew stronger. He knew how first class was supposed to work. He'd flown enough times to recognize what good service looked like. This wasn't oversight. This was something else. But instead of saying something, instead of calling her out, he stayed silent. Because he'd learned something else over the years, some battles just weren't worth fighting. Especially the ones where the opponent couldn't even admit the fight existed. He didn't want to be the angry black man. He didn't want to make a scene, even if no one else on that plane seemed concerned about how he felt. Minutes passed like hours. LeBron opened his notebook, flipping through the notes he'd made earlier. He tried to focus, but his thoughts kept returning to Susan's coldness and Whitman's smug remarks. The frustration simmered just under the surface. And he began to wonder, how many others went through this every day? How many people got judged before a single word left their mouth? How many were made to feel like outsiders, even in spaces they had every right to be? This wasn't just about service. This was about what society chooses to see, and what it chooses to ignore. The flight drifted into routine, but the tension never did. It clung to the air like fog, thick and unspoken. And next to LeBron, Mr. Whitman seemed determined to make sure he felt every bit of it. LeBron leaned back, trying to shut it all out, the judgment, the silence, the feeling of being reduced to something less than human. Around him, the soft hum of the engines, clinking glasses, and quiet conversation faded into the background. He felt detached, like he was watching it all through glass. It was a feeling he knew too well. People saw him, but they didn't really see him. They saw the icon, the brand, the headlines. Not the man beneath all that. Not the human being. Whitman shifted again, letting his knee press subtly against LeBron's. A quiet invasion of space, but enough to make him uncomfortable. "Hey, do you mind?" LeBron finally said, calm but firm. Whitman blinked, clearly caught off guard. He glanced down at his leg and pulled away with a mumbled, "Oh, sorry," like it was nothing. Like he was nothing. LeBron didn't respond. He didn't need to. The lesson wouldn't stick anyway. People like Whitman didn't change because of moments like this. And LeBron wasn't in the mood to teach anyone today. He just wanted the flight to be over. But as he sat there, staring out the window, something in him wouldn't let go of the weight he was carrying. This wasn't just about discomfort. This wasn't just about him. It was about something much bigger. He wasn't just LeBron James on this flight. He was anyone who had ever been judged unfairly for their skin, their background, their bank account, their clothes. Anyone who had ever been seen, but never really recognized. And even though the realization gave the moment more meaning, it didn't make it any easier. The plane sailed above the clouds, and LeBron found himself wishing, just for once, to live a moment as an ordinary person. No spotlight. No assumptions. No quiet, creeping prejudice. But deep down, he knew the truth. No mask or hoodie could hide him from the way the world chose to see him. Time passed. The silence between him and Whitman remained cold, awkward, unresolved. Each lost in their own thoughts. But LeBron's weren't quiet anymore. He kept wondering, how many people go through this? How many are judged without ever speaking a word? How many are made to feel like outsiders in spaces they've earned their place in? He stared out the window as the sky stretched out endlessly before him. The world felt distant, like a performance. And he wasn't sure if he was the actor or just the audience. He didn't feel like LeBron James, the global icon. He felt like a nameless face in a hoodie. A target for quiet suspicion. This was the kind of prejudice that doesn't scream. It whispers. It hides in politeness and subtle dismissals, in the way people look away or shift in their seats. It didn't make headlines, but it cut just the same. He had hoped to escape it, even for a few hours. But it had followed him here, like a shadow. His frustration simmered. And then, he did something he never usually did. He picked up his phone, opened the voice recorder app. His thumb hovered over the record button. LeBron wasn't the type to broadcast every slight. But today felt different. Today, it wasn't just about him being ignored, dismissed, or pushed aside. It was about everyone who felt this way. Everyone who had to shrink themselves to make others comfortable. Everyone who was judged by skin before they were judged by character. And the longer he sat there, the clearer it became. This flight wasn't just a journey. It was a message. And someone needed to hear it. LeBron had spent his whole life proving he belonged. But what about the millions who never had that chance? The ones without a platform, without the protection of fame? He knew he had to do something. Anything. So, without drawing attention, he tapped the record button on his phone. Set it in his lap. Angled the camera discreetly toward the aisle. He wasn't looking for confrontation. He was documenting something the world needed to see. Beside him, Mr. Whitman was deep in conversation now, talking animatedly with Susan and a few nearby passengers. They laughed, nodded, leaned in. LeBron didn't need to hear the words to know none of them were kind. It was in their eyes. The subtle glances. The intentional avoidance. LeBron adjusted the phone slightly, making sure the frame was right. He kept still, quiet, and visible, just like they wanted him to be. Susan floated past again. Her eyes flicked toward him for a half second, and then darted away. She didn't pause. Didn't speak. Her warmth was reserved for others. For Whitman. He was now halfway through a story about a high-level meeting in New York. A few passengers leaned in, soaking up every word. But no one, not a single person, acknowledged the man sitting silently beside him. The division was clear. Casual. Effortless. And deeply telling. LeBron sat there, absorbing it all. Not the words. The behavior. The way he was erased. Overlooked. Made to feel like furniture in a room full of curated attention. It was the kind of prejudice that didn't scream, it whispered. He'd experienced this before. In restaurants. On red carpets. Even in NBA locker rooms. But here, high above the clouds, it felt heavier. Like the air itself was pressing down on him. Then something shifted. An older woman, seated a few rows ahead, turned around slowly. Her eyes landed on him. Not curious in a warm way, but in that distant, clinical way. Like she was studying something, not someone. Like she was trying to figure him out without any intention of engaging with him. Their eyes met. She quickly looked away. Caught. LeBron exhaled slowly. That familiar feeling crept back in, of being watched, assessed, but never seen. He wasn't a man in that moment. He was an idea. A threat. A puzzle. A stereotype. The plane continued its slow climb into the sky. But inside, LeBron felt like he was sinking deeper. Deeper into the isolation. The silence. The knowing. Whitman hadn't said a word since the earlier elbow incident. But his presence was loud. His indifference was a wall. LeBron could still feel that small moment, that smug comment about size, the unspoken hierarchy he tried to impose with every movement. LeBron closed his eyes for a moment. Focused. This wasn't just about him being overlooked. It was about millions being judged daily for how they looked, where they came from, what language they spoke, or how much money they had. The inequality wasn't just in the headlines, it was right here, in the seats, in the glances, in the things left unsaid. No, he couldn't change all of it in one flight. But this moment, this small act of filming, of noticing, could spark something. He looked down at the screen. The video kept rolling. Unfiltered. Quiet. Uncomfortable. But real. He knew what this footage would do once it was out. It would trigger conversations. Stir discomfort. Force people to confront things they didn't even realize they carried inside. That was the first step. But for now, LeBron said nothing. Just observed. Let it unfold. The truth didn't need a spotlight, it just needed someone to see it. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was a witness. And he would make sure the world saw what he saw. The final stretch of the flight always dragged. The cabin settled into that strange, still energy of cruising altitude. Quiet. Dull. Suspended in the sky. But for LeBron, it wasn't quiet at all. Inside, his thoughts were loud. Each second brought more clarity, more weight. He felt like he was sitting at the edge of something, not just a story, but a shift. A turning point. Because the longer he stayed silent, the more he realized. This wasn't just about this one flight. This was about a pattern. A system. A truth that too many people pretend doesn't exist. And LeBron James? He had the platform. He had the proof. And soon, he'd have the voice. LeBron James wasn't looking for luxury or special attention. He wasn't hoping to be recognized or treated like a star. All he wanted was something far more simple, and far more powerful, to be seen as a human being. But from the moment he stepped onto that commercial flight, dressed in a hoodie, jeans, and a face mask, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't the kind of shift that's loud or obvious, it was subtle but unmistakable. Cold glances, dismissive body language, an unspoken discomfort that filled the air. Not because they knew he was famous, but because he was a black man who didn't fit their expectations. Flight attendants passed by him without so much as a word, offering warmth and smiles to others, while ignoring his presence entirely. His seatmate took up more than his share of space, casually pressing against LeBron's leg without apology. There were no greetings, no eye contact, only the quiet message that he didn't quite belong. LeBron said nothing. He had learned long ago how to swallow moments like these. But as the flight went on, the weight of these small indignities began to build. He could feel something rising within him, not anger, but clarity. So he did what millions wish they could do in moments like this. He documented it. He began recording, not with the intention of calling someone out, but to capture the truth, to make visible the everyday moments of exclusion that so often go unseen. He waited. And when the time felt right, he slowly reached up and removed his mask. In that instant, the mood inside the cabin changed. Recognition spread across faces. The same people who had overlooked him were now wide-eyed. The man beside him went quiet, his smugness replaced by visible discomfort. The flight attendant who had ignored him all flight froze mid-step, her expression shifting from indifference to shock. Then, LeBron spoke. Calm, composed, and powerful. "It's not about who I am," he said. "It's about how people like me are treated every day. Not seen. Not respected." He wasn't seeking pity. He didn't want apologies. What he wanted was something harder to give: awareness. After the flight, he posted the footage online. He didn't sensationalize it. He didn't add outrage. He simply wrote, "We all deserve respect, no matter who we are." And the world listened. The post spread like wildfire. Within hours, the video went viral. People from all over the world began sharing their own stories of being dismissed, ignored, or quietly judged because of their appearance, race, or background. The hashtag all passengers began trending as thousands of voices joined together in solidarity. The airline responded quickly, first with a formal apology, and then with action. They launched new training programs focused on unconscious bias and respectful service. They invited LeBron to meet with their leadership team to discuss long-term reform. Even the flight attendant issued a public apology and agreed to undergo further education. But LeBron made it clear, this wasn't about fixing his experience. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about those who never get heard. Those who experience this every day and have no way to speak up." This flight, which began with silence and subtle rejection, ended as the start of something far bigger. Not because LeBron James is a global icon, but because, in that moment, he stood up not for himself, but for the millions who go unseen, unheard, and unrecognized. He didn't just take off a mask. He exposed a reality the world could no longer ignore.